Hi, welcome to Rob's Models. I'm Rob, and today actually going to be starting a new build, which is the ICM Ghost of Kyiv in 1:72 scale. So we might as well just start getting on taking a few of these bits off. So got a collection of sprue cutters, scalpels and sanding sticks. So we'll just take off the cockpit first of all, because before I actually do anything, and I have noticed there's a bit more flash on this than I thought there was going to be. What I want to do before I do anything else is to take the cockpit tub. There's already going to be a flash which I'll need to get rid of. That's going to sit in here, but I want to make sure that if that goes in there, that doesn't actually go right the way up. I think I'm going to have to sand it a bit. Yeah, I'm going to have to do a bit of sanding on there. But if that's in there just very loosely, sidewalls are gripping on that because it's actually slightly too wide because it needs sanding. Now I know the resin seat isn't likely to be the same dimensions, but just checking that actually that would be able to drop in. In fact, I can see that that'd be plenty wide enough for the seat to drop in. Now the reason I wanted to check that is to make sure that I can build all this part up, which would have all the same colour, and then allow me to pop that in there, carry on with things, knowing that once the resin seat comes up and I can paint that, I can then drop that in without it fouling. So hopefully that's going to be due in the next couple of days. Actually, whilst I'm here, I've got that instrument panel to take off. Take off that part before I forget. I could quite see a few people missing that little part there and just sandwiching the two parts together, and then not until afterwards realising that we've got a square left on there. And there should be a control column somewhere as well. B16, this is B16, which to admit this is more flashy than I remember when I was doing the review. Okay. Now, one thing to bear in mind with ICM kits, or at least this one in particular, is they haven't actually got numbers on the parts themselves. You just need to cross-reference, which to be honest is quite easy for most parts here. But 16 is... have I got this upside down? I have, yep. There we go. So it doesn't actually have a... like an Airfix or a Veil kit where you would actually have the part number imprinted on there. That doesn't have it here. Right. We'll come to the landing gear parts in a moment. Let's just deal with the cockpit for now. So I want to pop the ejection seat aside and then get the sides of this flush. Now that was some big, some quite chunky sprue gates there. I will file those down later. Let's check first of all if that comes off there. It does seem to be quite a squeeze to get that in. Should fit nicely. We've got a bit of a shroud going around it. And the other thing as well is I also wanted to check there shouldn't be too much problems for me just to build this part in and then give it a go with the airbrush. It might be a little bit tricky to get that decal in. I reckon we should be able to do that in one. Try that again. There's a little ejector mark in there, you can just see it raised. That wouldn't have made much difference with this ejector seat because of course that's hollow. That could have just sat on top of that one, that little ejector stub there. but with the resin one going in there, I'm going to make sure I remove that. I will say that would have been a lot easier to have done before I put that instrument panel on. Won't put the control column in yet, but we'll have to keep that safe. So where were we? This part here, now it doesn't actually say which way round that goes, but I'm assuming the pipe work's going to match up with the pipe work already moulded in there, which it does. Again, just got a little bit of flash on the inside of that, so just run blade around. Fine, don't think anyone would have noticed, but we know it's there. File those larger tabs down. And just check that the two parts do fit together. There are a few location pins. Okay, that seems a bit of dodgy fit at the front. It's not exactly clipping together. You can see that once that goes together, because there's this sort of a bit of a natural curve to it, the two parts aren't flat, they're mating surfaces, there is a natural bow to it. There are some location tabs that you can see they're wanting to ping out, so it's going to be a case of lots of elastic bands and clamps to hold it in place, but we get the rough idea. Into here now. So you drop it in, it still feels wider than the actual part it's coming into. It wants to ping itself. I don't know if you can see while I push that. That's it, stayed in place, but no, there we go. So hold that in place there and give it a good go with the extra thin, getting that right in that gap. Should get a good surface between there. There is actually a little bit of a gap between the side of the instrument panels and the fuselage walls. So I'm just keeping pressure on those parts there just whilst we're going to wait for that to dry. One thing we do need to do though is I noticed that some of the holes on this part for the gear haven't actually made it through all the way, especially on the starboard side, and also on the locating pins for the nose gear as well. So I think before we do anything else, we're going to open up those holes just whilst wait for that to dry. Right, so cockpit tub is now in. And as you can see, that's in. I did have a clamp just to hold it in place whilst the glue dried. We have got a few gaps just around the rear bulkhead and around the sides of the instrument panel as well, which I will try to backfill in a moment. Opened out the holes that are in here. They literally just needed poking through. Obviously the plastic was just a little bit too thick, but that was fine just for the landing gear. And what I've also done is to build one of the intakes. I've done one because there's a few little issues with that. I did have to do some looking up on the internet for pictures just to try to get an idea of how this was going to go. So I've built one now. Still need to do a bit of tidying up on it, and again still want to put a little bit of filler in there. There's still a few little gaps, but that's the main part we're going to do now. So this doesn't really have locking pins. There's sort of a very loose fitting little tab there, but it kind of gives you a millimetre or so of movement, which is quite a bit. So you kind of get an idea of how it's going to go, but there's still a bit of movement. It is quite fiddly trying to hold it in place while the glue goes, but main issue that we've got straight away is there's ejection tabs there, little ejection pin marks, and two quite big ones which are actually visible on the sides. Actually, they go right over where this little cover goes. So we need to remove that first of all. So the scalpel, they're not too bad to get rid of. They do protrude probably about a millimetre. So I found just taking the blade, taking that off. You can see this is actually shave it off is probably the easiest way. Pretty much got it rid of, and we'll just use a thin sanding stick just to do that. There's no point doing the others because they're going to be hidden, but that first one is literally right over the line. Okay, so you can sort of still see the ghost of it a little bit there, I guess, but that's should be fine. In fact, only half of it would be visible anyway. So again, just got rid of that. That only takes a moment just to get rid of. So we'll come to these little parts in a moment, but it's a little bit tricky to hold this in position, and there's going to be a bit of a gap. Now I have roughly tidied it up. It's going to need filler. I realised that because with the alignment side of things, so it's going to need a little bit of tidying up once it's actually glued together. But the critical part is I have actually removed the larger parts of the stubs, just so at least we're going to get a flush fit there. And it's just going to be a case of just holding onto this. It's to be honest, could try to get something to try to hold it, but the thing is it's so fiddly that you kind of need your fingers just to keep it in position so it doesn't slide like it is. Trying to make that seam as small as possible. So whilst we're going to wait for that to dry, got some little parts here that just need a little bit of a clean up. I have given them a rough clean, but so this part here we can put on straight away, but I do find the second part I was a little bit not too sure on, and realised that I needed to do a little extra tidy. Now this, probably get that all the way round, the slots in here just to extend that part out, so hopefully you can see that just sort of smooth that off. So actually I should just left it. It's actually managing to kind of pinch it in place. There we go, so we've got that one in place now. Now before putting the second one in, which is kind of like the the cover, I believe that actually sort of, you know, retracts. It sort of fits in, but I found what I needed to do was to file the top bit down a little bit, because although it fits in, it kind of recesses, and I still think that one's gone in a little bit too far. That bottom bit I think should be more closer to being flush. I haven't quite got it completely flush, but closer to being flush to the bottom of the intake, and it kind of clips in just behind that new part that we've just put in. So what I've done is I will do what on this one, when it goes in now, I will need to tidy this up a bit, and it is a little bit fiddly popping in. I've got to be careful because this glue, of course, isn't dry. I'll pop that in. It seems a little bit wide at the moment, so it will need filing down, otherwise it's going to split the parts. I push that in there. You can see it just seems to be recessed a little bit too far. I mean, I think that one is still too far, but it seems a little bit further back. There's a little panel, the bottom panel's got 3 squares on, and they seem, on reference photo, seem to be a bit closer to the bottom edge. So the way to get round that is just to file this top part down a bit. I've only taken about 1mm off, and to be honest, it probably should be about 2 or 3, but I've already got that one glued in, so I need to not go too crazy on this one. So let's just trim that down a touch. That was using a bit of the core side of the stick. It also felt a little bit tight on that one, whereas actually with this one, got a few little gaps either side. That one felt a bit tighter going in. But before we put that in, one thing now we want to do, now that should have dried a little bit, I know it's still going to have to be careful, is this bottom part is basically just actually, well, just file the whole thing. So that just need, that bottom part of the intake could just do a little neaten, just to make sure that's square. Don't want them kind of not too harsh. And so obviously we can put that through there now, which is something which would be impossible to do when that part goes in. Make sure that's kept square. That's the top bit. So we filed with a more aggressive, just needs a tidy. And that's going to need just a little bit of filler just to go down that gap there. But now we should be able to get this part in. Get your dust off. So there's a little bit which has got 3. It's a bit tricky to see in the plastic, but in photos you can see there's 3 little boxes there. So now that goes in on the top. That butts up against the part we've just put in. We can now just push that in place. So that's now, and then we can push that down, and then on the inside. Now I know I've probably spent a while just going through this, but the first one, where the instructions, just go down the edges as well, don't really give this final part. Don't really give that much detail of where it actually goes. We'll just use a little bit just to do some gaps, which to be honest I don't think are going to be massively visible, but to do that, just a cocktail stick, and for this I'm using a perfect plastic putty, that top bit we'll get rid of now. So I'll just be taking a little bit on the end and going in from behind, so finding where that gap is and just using the cocktail stick just to push it through. And if you look in there, I don't even know if you're going to be able to see it, there's just a little white line. not enough to push it through the gap, just to fill the gap. That's worked out well. There's a little bit on the rear panel as well. Again, not too sure how visible it would be, especially by the time paint goes in there. Pleased with that. So just got a little bit of the white filler in there. It mainly sort of visible just on that part. You can see just in there, probably stands out more. So we know we can actually pop a bit of paint on there as well. Now, regarding the paint, I'm going to be using the off-white acrylic paint. That's 1028 from the ICM set. Now, interesting to note, when I've been looking at the paints, I did actually look, because white seemed, I'm so used to sort of like interiors being sort of like the interior colour green or a dark colour, so I did actually do some research. I say research, you know, typed in MiG 29 cockpit pictures into Google, and it does seem that they are actually quite white. Well, actually not quite this light, but I think that is from wear, and of course what I'll do is, once painted, actually we'll be putting a wash in there to try to get some of that raised detail out. So I think actually going for that lighter white and then putting a wash in there to get that detail to pop, highlight some of those switches, I actually think that will work fine. Right, so I've now given these a bit of a tidy up. So you can come in, actually let's see there, so got them both on here, and as you can see, like I did with the cockpit, I've just pushed in from the rear some of the filler, and then as it just started to come through, I've just neatened it up, and just using a dampened edge, or the dampened point of a cocktail stick, just to tidy that up, and a little smear of filler down the seams. To be honest, having sort of held these in place, it does look like there's going to be gaps anyway in places around the edge, but I think that's going to be countered by the bow when that goes on there. But of course we're still going to have a few seam lines here and there, so I'll neaten it up properly once we've actually got to that sort of stage. But just for now, just to tidy things up a little bit. What I want to do now is to blow in a bit of the off-white into the cockpit. Whilst I'm there, I'm also going to do the intakes, because those are also the off-white colour as well. Then they can get masked up when that goes on there. Not only with the cockpit, but the cockpit surround area will also be in white. I'm just putting it on very lightly. It's starting to look a little bit wet there, so I'll stop, move on, because there's no primer. Just want to get it built up slowly in layers.